What is going on, everybody? BobbyFi back with my man Eric Sheets Haber. We are bringing you another week of PGA golf. Sheets has been really close. He seems to be close every week, or every week but one. And I have had a couple bad weeks after a solid showing. At least some real good sweats there for a bit. Sheets, what's going on? Tell us a little bit about last week, and then jump right into this week.
All right. So first of all, I just want to remind you guys of something. Is that when you play low-owned guys, with some exceptions, they're usually low-owned for a reason. You know what I mean? like usually guys that you're taking at 6,800 or 3K in football or whatever it is, that are low-owned, cheap guys usually suck. Okay, and you're playing them because you want that that leverage, and you'll get a couple of good opportunities or whatever. But the going into Sunday, I mean, it just kind of goes to show. I had two really good leverage spots going into Sunday in Adam Schenk at 0.8% and Patrick Rogers at 3.5%. The other guys that I had were pretty standard. Well, I should say standard. Like Matthew Wolff, and he was only 9%. But here's something that people don't realize when you're looking at lineups. You see what my chances are. By the time it was Sunday, like the fact that overall Wolff is 9% didn't matter because everybody that was in the top 2,000 had him in their lineup. You know what I mean? So at that point, I mean, I guess of the people I was contending with, he was probably 70% owned, right? So he wasn't really wasn't worried about him. And the other guys I had Bryson DeChambeau, who everybody had, and I had Matsuyama, who some people had. But so it really came down to whether Schenk or Rogers were going to be able to get it going. And you know what? They just didn't. And that's going to happen most of the time. You have, substandard guys that you have for a reason. Look, they ran really hot first couple of days to get me in that position, right? So, I mean, that's the way it goes, and that's fine. But, I'm content with the position I was in, and you had leverage where it was possible, and that's just the way it goes. One kind of interesting little suck out that I had was I also, as I said, I mentioned I played a NASCAR. As I play every freaking slate of NASCAR, and I was looking at my winnings during the course of golf, and it really wasn't going anywhere. It was going a little bit down, maybe a little tick up and a little bit down again. And then NASCAR started, and NASCAR looked like a total train wreck, and it actually was like everybody wrecked basically in this car. I don't know if you saw the film of this, but there was a huge wreck going into pit road where it took out 10 drivers or something like that. It was crazy. And, all half my guys that's 50% owned just disappeared. And I just totally stopped thinking about it. And then at the end of the day, my winnings went up by 600, out of nowhere. And I'm like, what happened? I totally forgot that I put one lineup in the 400 in NASCAR that I gave up on. But it actually ended up cashing with two guys wrecked at lap 10. Yeah, that's how crazy it was. If you had even four guys that made it to the finish line, you know what I mean? You had a shot. So that was kind of.
You could have done that with 4 out of 6.
Right. And I actually did. And that was another suck. And I actually got a 5 out of 6 cash.
I had a bunch of 5 out of 6 cashes. Literally, I think most of the ones that I actually got. I had a lot of 4 out of 6s, unfortunately, but I had most of my 5s and 6s that were cashing even without the winner.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was pretty easy actually.
Well, what was good was that I don't know if people remember, but I played 3 of the bigger ones, like the hundreds in PGA, and one of them actually was one of the ones that were 5 out of 6 that cashed. That was good for the overall whatever. But let's get into to this week. Do you want to start with me sharing my screen, or do you want to we'll start talking and then
I enabled it for you to share your screen. I think it's an interesting week because, look, I sort of want to just echoing what you were saying. I don't know that I feel exactly the same. I understand that the prices are different. I just feel like the courses have been so easy, and for a lot of, especially all these young, talented golfers, I think you're going to see, scores bunched up until we saw Bryce pull away. And it had to do with Wolff sort of blowing up at first, and then he came back, and finished strong. But the truth is, with young golfers and stuff like that, that's going to happen. I think you're going to see. What we've learned though, of anything, is everybody who's winning has 2 guys less than 2% on the lineup. So the last thing I want to do is encourage people to play chalk. Right. I think you can play high end chalk if you want to. I think there's some middle and low end guys who are medium chalky, but I mean, last week, nobody in the 6Ks on DraftKings was under 10% owned. And I think, I don't know how it ended on the leaderboard, but I think in the top 20, you had, I think like 12 or 13 of them were in that category.
Really?
So something absurd like that, or between that and 7,400. It was almost everybody. So I don't think that I think you need to absolutely expose yourself a ton to a lot of wild card plays, to young kids with talent, and this week specifically, the guys who can bomb the ball. I really, really, really think it's important, and I think you have to take strong stances on some of these young guys and try to, but you're going to have to like try and spread it out. But you can do that because nobody's getting too high ownership. A good example is a guy like Norlander, who, what did he finish, 6th last week, and he's 6,500. On a course that's different, it's longer, but it's got some of the same type of characteristics that you would want. Like, there's no reason why he wouldn't be able to play this course in a similar fashion, but he's not going to get, like, yeah, people will have some interest, but there's so many good golfers, he's just going to be sort of left by the wayside. So you're going to see all these guys in the 6Ks to 7,200s basically below 10% again. I think you want to be overexposed on the ones you like, and then spread a lot of your ownership down there. And for me, it's going to be paying up in probably 2 spots, and then paying a lot down, and then maybe 1 middling player or occasionally 2.
Wow, this is going to be fun then, because I think we're going to be a little bit different. But so just so you know,
paying up, I guess, is the thing, because I'm counting paying up as things above 9,200 here, which I probably should say over 9K here. I probably should say 10 to 11K, but 9 to 11K. I'm going to have 2 guys from that range in most of my life, is what I was saying.
So it's interesting. So for those of you that are just, this is the first time you're watching me this week. So I don't know if you even caught this, Bobby, but for those of you that weren't watching or you didn't pay attention, I actually did a video yesterday, and I really do it for my own benefit. Like on Monday, what I do is I just look at the salaries before any content comes out, right? And I look at what I think, and I do a little bit of fiddling around with line of construction, and this is my process. And I just come, and I went over this like in a 20-minute video yesterday. And then what I do is I kind of do a little more, and then I go over the stuff with Bobby, and that's when I just add like really good guys, my player pool that Bobby comes up with, and he talks me up with some guys and get his opinion. And then on Wednesday is when we kind of finalize things. So the first thing, I'll just repeat what I said yesterday before we even go into the players, is it's a very interesting course situation, because I don't know if this ever happens, but for the next 2 weeks, they're going to be playing on the same course. And what's going to happen is interesting. So next week, you're going to have some of these guys that are going to be playing back to back on the same course. And it's going to be interesting because on the one hand, your natural instinct is going to be, well, I think these guys have to have an advantage, right? Because they played both weeks on the same course. And yet on the other hand, maybe if that narrative gets a little bit too popular, maybe it's going to get a fade that. So that was the one thing I was thinking about. Second thing from a course perspective is this course is usually very, very tricky around the greens, and it usually carries a really, really deep rough. But what they're doing for this course, they're actually, this week is going to be easier than next week. So they're trying to grow the rough out over the next week. So the difference between this week and next week is it's going to actually punish bad drivers more next week than it will this week. And likewise, like around the green, they're going to make the greens like much faster and much trickier next week. So it's something to keep in mind if you over emphasize what happens this week when you look at next week.
Right.
So that is one thing to keep in mind. So you want to like just go, start from the top and just talk about what or do you want to go overall slate?
Why don't you pull your screen up?
Yeah.
And then we're going to start talking. I just wanted to sort of I always like to talk about sort of the general builds, but I'll show mine at the end too, and you'll see sort of some.
Yeah. So don't take these percentages for whatever. So this is what I'm doing. What I'm going to do is I want to look at the whole player pool out here. And this was my analysis and on yesterday, and it hasn't changed that much after a day. So what I first do is I look at these top guys, right? So basically 11K all the way down through 10.4, 10.2. And the first thing I noticed was that nothing really stood out for me. In other words, I didn't like eyeball this and say, boy, oh boy, this one's so much cheaper than the other ones. Like the first thing I looked at is, okay, this seems kind of logical, like a logical top 5, not too much of a difference between these top 5. And that's the one I kind of looked at. And the next thing that I noticed when you go down a little bit is going back to where we were a couple of weeks ago. So remember, last week was a much easier field than this week. So you would expect, and this is what happens, some of these guys really, got price decrease, and some of them didn't. But the first things that I looked at were all of these guys, like Im at 8,900, Reed at 8,800. They all took price cuts. But the first guy that kind of stood out to me, Matsuyama at 10K, was this range, was Cullen Morikawa at 9,200. Now this was my look yesterday, and that was literally the first 2 guys that I put in my lineup.
Can I say before we get to my lineups, that was the exact same thing I did. Just so
that's so funny. Actually, the first 3 guys I put in were at the time were Reed, Morikawa, and Woodland. Those are the first.
My most owned. That's pretty funny.
Yeah, those are the first 3 guys I put in, and that was just my instinct is to do that. And then when I went through construction, I found that this is kind of interesting. When we go down to the 7K range, you'll see what I'm talking about. Is whether you played kind of an above, 10K guy in, depended on whether you really valued the 7,800 guys that much more than the 7,200 guys. Like, for example, if you could live with a 7K guy as opposed to a 7,800 guy, then you could be able to pay up for some of the other guys above 9,200. But if you really, really like those 78 to 7,900 guys, then you probably couldn't get away with it. And as we go down, you'll kind of see what I'm talking about. Right. So Woodland, Morikawa, and what's his name? Reed were top guys. And what's interesting is all I've seen over the last couple of 24 hours, there's a lot of content, a lot of people just really slamming on Morikawa, such that, okay, he had a really heartbreaking loss, and he was great, and then he just hasn't been able to do anything. He's lost strokes, this, that, and the other thing. He's lost strokes here, lost strokes there. Maybe he has a week off, whatever. But remember, golf is a funny game, man. And it's an interesting thing. Like when we talk about different sports, basketball to baseball, whatever. I mean, and I'm a golfer. I play, and 2 weekends of golf to me really doesn't mean anything with respect to a guy's long-term form, and especially if it's a course that really rewards good iron play and getting on the freaking green. So I am even more confident that guys like Morikawa and a really, really cheap Woodland are going to be kind of almost fixtures for me. That was my first overall view. From an overall slate. Do you want to talk about it like that, or?
No, that's great. I like that. I think that that makes sense as a building starting core. The guys who I highlighted the most by the end of it, I actually ended up preferring trying to just get up to Justin Rose a little bit ahead of Morikawa. But Matsuyama is my highest owned player currently. Max Homa is the guy I'm paying down for the most. Byung-Hyun Ahn is who I'm paying in the middle for the most, along with Woodland. They're about the same.
If you by the way, if you watch my video, you will see that Ann was in that perfect spot where I wanted a guy like that. And I even said, I'm going to leave it to Bobby to recommend him tomorrow.
That's funny.
If he does, then he's good. So okay.
Yeah, I want to be heavy on him. I like him a lot for this type of course. I think he's still too cheap. He struggled a little bit, but I'm not worried. And even in struggling, it's not like we're talking about guys, who's been completely like worthless out there. I don't feel worried about him or Woodland even missing the cut before. One guy who I'm really high on, which I don't know what's going on with people. And was I the only person who watched last week, or is there a reason why no one? I mean, I know in golf, like you never play the winner, especially if he hasn't been doing as well. But like there was a lot of people on Matt Wolff last week for a good reason. I don't see a reason why we're going to get off of him now. This doesn't.
Yeah. Here's my reason. Okay,
but go ahead.
Go ahead. Go for it.
My case for him is you have the guy who can drive the ball of anybody in this field the furthest of anybody on the longest course we've played so far since the break. Yes, his irons at times were questionable, but they were also the best 2 out of the 4 days last week. So I don't feel as worried about that as I might. What I would be concerned is I need to check the weather report beforehand, because he doesn't seem to play very well if there gets to be any type of wind, or if they narrow a little bit the fairways. But again, like you said, the rough isn't so bad. He played incredible from all those light rough spots last week, and he was great on the green. So, I mean, he was great on the tee. I just think that he makes a lot of sense, and especially just because no one's going to go there, I don't mind putting him as a tournament staple kind of a guy for me, a guy who I'll have 25% of. You know, I don't mind taking that shot. He's incredibly young, very talented, played on the same team with Hovland and at Oklahoma State in college, was actually considered the best player for a good portion of that time. And there's no reason to think he won't be the next Hovland or better. And Hovland still has a ways to go to even keep getting better. So, I mean, they're both great. And I think that we could see Wolf be at the top of the, FedEx Cup standings within the next couple of years. I really believe that.
Yeah, I think the reason why he's not getting as much love also is, again, I talked about before how a lot of these guys took price hits because of the field is a little bit stronger, and Wolf didn't. So I guess that's why he's maybe not popping as much as.
Yeah, I'll take advantage of that personally. I just think that he's a guy who anytime he's going to have low ownership, pretty much at any reasonable price that he's going to be, I think you play him because he's the talent is through the roof. He's a guy who crushes par fives. I mean, he just crushes fives, which is what helped him a lot last week.
So a guy that you mentioned, and I want to talk about these top guys. The guy you mentioned, and I actually highlighted him as maybe someone to fade if he became too owned, was going to be, and this is just my Monday view, was going to be Justin Rose, because Justin Rose, he's got like that those two things going for him that really just make a lot of sense. That just if the narrative's picked up way too much, I don't want to just take a guy that's too chalky. Is number one, he's really sharp right now, and number two, he's got insane course history here. So those two things obviously make him probably a good play, but I just want to make sure that that ownership doesn't get too carried away on him. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I mean, if he becomes like 30%, I mean, he can't be 30%, but if he trends that high, right. I just wanted to make sure that he didn't become everybody's consensus top play. That was I was just kind of worried about that. It turns out that I don't think that's going to be the case.
No.
But that was what I was worried about.
Do that to more of the top tier, because personally, I'll just give you my preferences. I have it. I mean, of these guys, I really like Rose, obviously, and Matsuyama are the guys I have the most of. But I really like Koepka, Cantlay, and Thomas. So I'm trying to figure out what to do, which basically means, again, I'm probably going to have to not play as much Victor Hovland, which seems like a mistake. It kind of sucks, but it's just because if I'm going to pay up for two guys, and I like that many of the other, and I like Schauffele too. I think that his ownership's going to be lower, but the problem is, how do I get ahead on these other guys if I want to play Cantlay, who's going to be the chalkiest guy, and honestly, probably the course suits him the best. He's played the least golf of any of the big guys since the break, and I'm using any excuse I can to try and fade the most chalky, especially because I still prefer Justin Thomas, Matsuyama, and Justin Rose in a vacuum against Cantlay, just straight up. And then I would put, I think Koepka, you play him because if there's a guy who could potentially run away with a field like this, Koepka and Rahm actually are the two guys who kind of stand out with Bryce gone. So I don't know. I like Koepka in the mix, and I think Schauffele is just a really, really safe bet with good upside here. And I think he'll be in contention on Sunday. I really do. But
it's really funny. I was going to say,
really like two of these top guys everywhere, basically.
It was really funny. I was going to say that people watching this are going to have a really hard time because of these top five. The guy that I'm probably going to end up settling on, because you were saying like
You're going to say Rahm. Yeah.
I was going to say Rahm. Literally for no other reason than my initial look at the ownerships has him like half the ownerships of the other guys. You know what I mean? Like,
Koepka shouldn't be too owned either, and Schauffele as well. But I get it. And I definitely am going to use some of this stuff to play a little differently on FanDuel, where the pricing is a little more bunched up, but where you're going to get lower ownership. I mean, I don't know. I like those guys. That's the problem. I'm trying to decide between those five, basically, and that's why I'm leaning more towards Matsuyama and Rose. It still allows you to do better things with the rest of your lineup. And you could play three guys in the 9Ks, like if you wanted to. I mean, I don't think Ricky Fowler's a bad play at all this week. There's just other ways I would rather build for the most part. So that's sort of what I'm looking at.
So what I did is I went kind of like panel by panel. Like when I did it yesterday, I think it's the same. Instead of going like 8K to 9K, I'd still like panel by panel, so I could see like everybody in here. You know what I mean? And then I kind of scroll down. Just so you guys know, like right now, I have 18 guys that I'm definitely playing, and then 7 guys that are kind of like I think I'm playing, and the guys I think I'm playing are going to be just completely either removed or added to or whatever, depending on my conversation with Bob. Just giving you guys full disclosure. You know what I mean? So as I go through these, I'm going to tell you the guys that I'm playing of these guys. So I just didn't do Hovland. No problem with him. I just didn't get to him. I didn't play Fowler. I'm definitely playing Im and Reed, and I'm definitely playing Mark Leishman. I mean, he's very volatile, but that's fine. I'm actually going to go on this course at this price with a guy that I was talk trash about, but I don't usually play, and I am going to play Kuchar this week. And those are the only guys I was 100% sure I'm playing. And Reed, sorry, if I didn't say it. So Im, Reed, and Kuchar from this range. I actually thought about Neiman, and I wanted to get your opinion. I wanted your opinion on everybody that's kind of in this list, and I wanted your opinion on Spieth. Also, because you usually play more of him than I do. What do you think of like all these guys that I'm showing right now?
So I'm leaning heavier on Im because I think the ownership is going to be crazy low. So I'm going to go for the low ownership. And while he hasn't been great, he is great in general, and this course suits him absolutely fine. He didn't play great after making the cut last week, but I'm not worried about him overall. I feel like he's a safe guy. I feel like this price, it just a little bit seems ridiculous to me. So he's the one I have the most interest of in this range. I probably am going to do what I just keep saying I'm not going to do and play a little bit of Patrick Reed while nobody plays him. I'm just going to bet on the long-term results over how he's been lately. I don't know what else to say there. I'm hearing a lot of people who I like talk about Jordan Spieth, and I'm open to that. He can be good on courses like this with the irons. If the putter is working, he can be really streaky, but I think he's interesting. And then, I'm leaning more the Kuchar Spieth route than I am the more owned. I'm going to fade a little bit more of Neiman and Leishman, who are going to be the higher owned of the bunch, just because I have so much in the high range. I can't play everybody down here. So the guys I do play will be more. Im will be the one I have some significant ownership on, but mostly it'll be little bits of Spieth, little bits of Kuchar, a little bit of Neiman, and then a lot of Woodland. I really want to play Hadwin, but at high ownership for a guy who doesn't drive the ball very far, it worries me a little bit. But he's so good in between. He could a lot of the other holes really suit him. So I'm sort of going back and forth on Hadwin, which is why I keep landing on Matt Wolff. So heavy ownership, Wolff, Woodland, and Im in this tier, and then sprinkles of the other guys I mentioned.
Okay. All right. So let's scroll down.
I do want to say I'm worried about Hadwin hurting me. He was great for me last week. I told you before, on our last show, he was my highest owned player, but he didn't quite win the tournament, but he finished tied for fourth. I like him on this course, but I don't like him because of the potential drivability and the potential, of some of these big swingers really taking advantage. I just worry about him in that type of format.
Okay, so in this range right here, this next panel, I guess, I mentioned Ann. I want to ask you about him. I'm definitely going to play Scheffler. Somebody who could shoot a +7 and a -7 is fine for me.
Yep.
I haven't decided on day yet. The other guy for sure I'm going to play is Connors, and he was the guy for sure. And the guys I was thinking about playing, again, these are on my thinking about, are Varner, and again, I want to ask you if this is a Mickelson week, just because, again, like just be tricky around the greens and that kind of stuff, but probably won't end up doing it. But definitely Connors, definitely. And I guess he's in this range, but he's in my lineup already. Is Joel Dahman, definitely going to play him, and that's where I'm at. What do you like of any of these guys?
So I guess I didn't really mention the specifically exactly 8K guys in the other range. I don't mind anybody who wants to take shots on Bubba. I don't love the course for Fitzpatrick, but the price is like, it just feels like he's such a safe bet to be at least, consistently under par here. I mean, I think, what was it? I think he had two times in the last 5 times out. He's gone bogey free in all of the rounds. It feels like a course where I could seeing him being really strong there. He doesn't make a lot of bogeys. So I just think he's a solid play, who's going to get overlooked again. but not, again, not a big driver, just a guy who can maybe make it up by not making mistakes and being good around, in on the green and whatnot. On is the highest owned I have in the 7K range. Scheffler is the second highest owned I have.
Nice.
So those are the guys who I'm heavy on. I'm flirting with the idea of getting a lot more interested in Cameron Champ. The price is not my favorite, but it's interesting because if you would have said Cameron Champ at only 400 cheaper than Wolf. Now both these guys are big bombers and all this, but Wolf is like, I think, like the higher upside guy, and he's only 400 more, and he's half his own after being second. It doesn't really make sense to me, so I sort of couldn't get that out of my mind. So I think that, Cameron Champ I'm just sort of deciding with. And then I've heard some people mention, and I haven't done enough research into it yet, about Kokrak and Snedeker. Snedeker, I actually could just tell you about the research myself. Like, it's pretty basic. The problem is, so here's my issue. Snedeker, you could argue, Scheffler actually is a much better golfer to me than everybody in this range. And the weirdest part is I cannot get over the fact that if he had shot like 4 over day one and ended up 4 under and still missed the cut, or 3 over day one and ended up 4 under, missed the cut, I think people would be all over him at 7,800 this week. He was 9K last week. Yeah. He's a better golfer than everybody in this price range at this point of their career. Now, I could make an argument for, but like, I really like Scheffler. So I think that he's really going to be, as much as I talk and I have some current projected ownership for the other guys, he's probably the one I'm going to end up just sort of committing a little bit more to. And then I don't mind, because I'm playing some of these unusual guys. I think Varner is going to get some ownership, but I actually really like Varner on this course. He sort of suits both categories. And I don't mind going back to Ryan Armour and Russell Henley. Those are the other guys I'll have. Oh, and Scott Stallings. Those are just some ownership guys. But these are low owned. Those are just guys I'm dabbling with 5 to 12%. But I wanted to mention their names along with Lanto Griffin and Mark Hubbard. Hubbard, actually, I just realized now, I've got Hubbard actually probably about 20%.
Well, we're going to get there. I'm just not showing that.
I'm sorry. I was going all the way down to the all the way through the 7Ks.
Well, because this is what happens. See, when I was doing this, do you see how many guys are in this range?
Yeah, so I'm just there's
so many
to get rid of. I know, that's the thing, is it's like the 6K ranges have been.
So if you want to extend to the next panel, I'm going to get to a guy who I'm going to be really heavy on probably. Okay. Is going to be Horschel.
Yeah.
So in this, if you go down for more of these 7,400s, again, I'm just staring at this. Lanto Griffin, I wanted to get your opinion on that one. Stallings, again, he's on my bubble, so if you like him, I'll probably try him. I'm not going to go back to Hubbard, but Lanto, if you like him, I'll probably play him. What do you think of I didn't play Ian Poulter a few weeks ago when you did, and he ended up really, he had a great weekend, I think.
That was a much better course for him than this one is.
Okay.
I'm not going to say he won't end up in my lineup because of his price, but he just, it's not like an exciting play to me.
And what do you think about Rory? Like after Sabatini, after just killing people.
I think he's a solid play. I'll be ahead of the field on him for sure. I just don't know, because I sort of prefer Russell Henley and Ryan Armour.
Okay.
I don't know if I prefer Armour, actually, to be honest with you, but I do prefer Russell Henley a little bit. But I'm fine with him. I also like, I like Scott Stallings just beneath him. I think that he's a little streaky, but he definitely has the upside with the way he hits the ball. So I have a little bit of interest in him, but the guy who I have the most interest, the guys, I looked at my ownership here. I have the most ownership of Max Homa of anybody in this range. And I also have a lot of Bud Cauley and Brian Stewart down.
Yeah, they're coming. They're coming.
Those are all the guys. That's the way I'm looking at it. And then this other than that, the significant ownership will be, I'll have about 15 to 20%. I want to be well ahead of the field on Lanto Griffin. Well ahead. I want to be ahead of the field on Rory, a little bit, but not as much again. And then Henley we've got. And then Hubbard. Those are my pretty much my guys in the under 7,500.
Yeah, well, as I scroll down and to look at the panels, is guys that you mentioned that I was not looking at yet were Homa, who's definitely in my pool. He's definitely my top 7, 18 players, and also Bud Cauley, who you mentioned. Mm-hmm. I have him in there also, and I was thinking about. You said Stewart?
Yeah, Stewart. He's just been super, super, super solid.
Yeah. Okay, so you got through those, and let me just go. Now, as I go beneath here, the only guy that I ended up with, you tell me, but the only guy I ended up with below 7K
Yeah.
was this guy that's, well, there are two of them. One that's in my lineup here, and that's Neesmith. And the other one is glutton for punishment, Munoz again. So those were the two guys that I had interest in below 7K. You have any below 7K specials here?
Well, I had to, you know what I mean? I told you about the way I was building, and while most of the guys are the low 7Ks, I like those 370, 100 particularly.
Okay.
I don't mind going back exactly at 7K to Kyle Stanley. Had a terrible day one, a really strong day two, and just didn't quite make the cut. I don't mind going to him. I again, it's like him and Scheffler. I feel like you're getting ridiculous. Like there is huge upside for them at these prices. Now, Kyle Stanley is really inconsistent. We didn't know Scheffler was as inconsistent as he was because of his how he played last week, but on Thursday. But so anyway, those are the first guys who sort of stood out to me. Keegan Bradley was another one at 7,100, by the way, who is just a guy who I like taking chances on. Another really, really streaky guy, but again, not as high as I am on a little bit a guy like Kyle Stanley.
What was his price? Bradley, 71. Yeah, he made my Monday video. I was thinking about him, and he just didn't quite make it. You like him as a 7,100 guy here?
I like him. I don't want to say I love him.
No.
I have to do a little more digging on him, to be honest with you, before I make my final decisions. Because other guys who are weirdly grading out well and actually look like they're going to be decent plays are like Jim Furyk. It's just become.
Yeah, what do you do with him?
It's become a little bit of a different game, this golf these days, because you've got these guys putting up these ridiculous and having such a huge bunch of them that maybe getting a guy who finishes 25th or 30th is not going to be good enough. I mean, you could deal with one or two, but if he's at 6,900, if he's my cheapest guy, that's not the worst case in the world. So I don't mind taking a shot with him here personally. I prefer him. I have him about the same as I have Neesmith. I think they're both just fine, blah. I honestly am not particularly excited about either of them. I do feel kind of excited about the getting revenge from Munoz, but it's really just a silly, idea. Wawrinski, another one, is a pretty good hitter, but not overly exciting. One guy who's not going to be owned, just it's interesting because he won this tournament 3 years ago. Jason Dufner at 6,800. He's a guy I want to be overexposed to in the lower tier. Looking down, and then I've got. You mentioned Norlander. I'm about to get to those two guys. So there's two guys on the lower tier that I'm have significant exposure to. Norlander is one of them. I'll probably be like 15 to 20% on him, maybe even higher.
Wow. Okay.
I think the field is going to jump on him too more than people think. Like there aren't that many really cheap guys that could stand out, and just his showing last week alone, is sort of proof of concept for his game. One that I'm going to have to hold my nose for, but I really like getting him in the millionaire maker because I don't really want to play him in my high buy-ins anymore. He made the cut last week and shot 6 over on Saturday. Harry Higgs.
Mm-hmm.
So
fat guy.
But another guy who makes a lot of birdies can be good on these long courses. So kind of interesting. But the real one I'm just interested in, again, just because I believe he's a good golfer. He's good as the courses get longer. He's really good on par fives. I was kind of disappointed he didn't play last week because he was going to be one of my sleeper guys. It's Carlos Ortiz. No ownership. A couple, 2 tournaments ago, what did he end up finishing? 5th. Absolutely a much better golfer than he's priced or owned at all the time. So he's a guy who I think I might have him and Norlander in a few lineups together and really get creative. I could play the 3 of those top guys together if I do that. That's sort of some of the routes I'm looking at. Trying to play mostly one of these 6K guys with 1 or 2 of the low 7Ks, and then a high middle to 2 top guys. That's sort of the build I'm looking at for the most part.
Yeah. Now again, as long as we're kibitzing around this range here, I mean, I may as well. I mean, if you get to play Norlander at 6,500, I may as well throw in a lineup with Shank again at 6,500.
Sure.
I may as well throw in one with Matt Jones at 6,600. I may throw in with Aaron Wise at 6,500, whatever it is. Now, what about this guy? There's your Ortiz. Did this McCumber, did he have a run this past weekend?
I actually don't remember.
Okay, I thought that
the name sounds familiar, so maybe he did, but I mean, I've never thought about playing him. So
no, I guess he did not. He did not. I thought that he was doing okay.
Yeah.
You know what he was? He was in I think he was in a featured group that I was sweating. That's why I remember his name.
It's funny how that happens sometimes. But there's some other guys like I'm trying to see real quick. I had
Burgoon.
I mean, it's nobody else particularly exciting down
but
here.
Who needs it? But you know, but who needs it? Like, and this is the way I looked at it. So for me, if you need to play Burgoon or guys like that, it's because you really want to get, you know, 2 of these 10K guys in, right? I mean, if you don't really need the 10K guys, then who needs Burgoon? And I'm using Burgoon as an example. You know what I mean? Like, who needs to go Burgooning if you don't even feel you want, you know, Thomas and Cantlay in the same lineup? You know what I mean? But if you do, like, I just have so much, I don't want to say faith, but maybe I just haven't been around long enough. But for me, I have no problem with, you know, Patrick Reed, I don't know,
Sure.
Leishman, just to win the tournament. You know what I mean? Like
you're differentiating ownership by that, but you're not really differentiating. So here you're differentiating based on recent history. These guys have proved they can win these tournaments, like, or at least contend in them. You know, I mean, you needed Matt Wolff last week if you wanted to make money. Really.
Right.
So, and like you said, well, there might be 1,000 people who had him.
Yeah, there were 100,000 that didn't. I mean, like,
yeah, seriously. And then on FanDuel, you know, what's funny is that he was like 6% owned on FanDuel, and like his price was different. His price. And by the way, I'm going to go right back to that on FanDuel this week too. I'm going to play a little bit of him over there because.
Did you look at FanDuel enough to make a distinction between who is better on FanDuel as opposed to DraftKings?
So basically, it's more of an overall thought thing. Yeah, I mean, for some guys, like Fox is cheaper on DraftKings percentage-wise by a good amount. It's pretty basic. I can actually pull up a spreadsheet I have.
Wait, who's more?
Matt Wolff is more expensive on FanDuel, but he's also I would say he's going to be less owned. But the truth is, you can kind of get in who you want. It's sort of like it is. You know what I mean? Like it's like that for most sports, for most things. FanDuel's just a little bit easier to get in the guys you want to get in. And the leaders are all a bunch of the top, so you really are just sort of taking your pick, not worrying about sacrificing 1,000 or whatever for one guy versus another because they're mostly pretty bunched up. So sorry, I'm reading the wrong thing, but I'm gonna pull up my spreadsheet real quick and tell you the guys.
Yeah, let me stop sharing mine, and you can pull your thing up.
I'm not gonna show this spreadsheet. Oh, okay. It's a combination of a couple things that I'm definitely not allowed to show.
Okay.
Which I can tell you out there, but I will read the guys who stand out.
Sure.
A little bit to me in this. Oops. So there we go. So one of the guys, Keurig's price is something that stood out on DraftKings as just being low enough to where he just seems likely to make the cut and be able to at least have a top 20, have a shot at a top 20 finish. So his price looks cheap. Matsuyama's price looks especially cheap on DraftKings, which I know you do DraftKings real quick first. Hadwin's price looks too cheap. So does Kuchar's. Who else? Kevin Streelman looks too cheap. Another guy who I actually have a little bit of ownership in, but not much. Kyle Stanley looks significantly too cheap. Nick Taylor and Phil Mickelson, Luke List, but Brian Stewart and Joseph Bramlett. I don't think you should use these things as gospel or anything. Chris Kirk, a lot of it's based on he hasn't played much other than last week. On FanDuel, some of the guys who stand out, most of them are the cheap guys, and they're sort of insignificant cheap guys, like literally the last guys you'd consider playing, like Kevin Tway. But Sepp Straka, really cheap over there, but he's just not a guy I really want to play either place, to be honest. Even though I did play him a little bit last week. Maybe I will throw him into a lineup. I'll make a little note to throw him into one lineup. Let's see who else we got. Troy Merritt is pretty cheap over there. I don't love him this week like I did last week. Sam Burns is much better play on FanDuel than he is on DraftKings because the other plays in his price range. I feel like same thing with. I'm sorry, I got that one wrong. Sam Burns. I'm sorry, that's Yahoo on that sheet. Who else was there? Oh, sorry, Luke List. Luke List on FanDuel as well. Just Luke List looks too cheap all over the place for his upside. I agree with that too. Pat Perez on FanDuel, really, really cheap. There aren't that many guys under 8K. He's one of them. Max Homa, 8,600, too cheap for him over there. Streelman also shows up as being pretty good over there as well. Again, Adam Hadwin does as well, and Leishman shows up as being a little too cheap. So maybe I'll get any Leishman exposure I have over on FanDuel instead.
Hey, can I we don't usually talk too much about DFS theory and just learning how to play and all this stuff. Sure. you had mentioned that that you have a spreadsheet that has the differences between FanDuel and DraftKings or whatever it is. So one thing that and I talk about this a lot in poker, when you're learning how to play or when you're learning how to get better at something, there's always a question of whether you want to do the work or have someone do it for you, right? So like, in other words, would you rather, for example, go through the time to make your own projections, or is it a better use of your time to just rely on someone else's, right? Or likewise, are there some things that maybe it's worth putting that effort in? And I remember back in poker, I said, listen, to all my students, I said, listen, you should always learn to do by hand an ICM calculation at least one time, or an all in or fold calculation at least one time, just to kind of see how the math works. And one thing that I did do when I first was doing DFS was, you remember that when I first started, Bobby, I was to do this 2+2 football contest. Every year, just doing every week, doing a week by week NFL slate. And so I started to learn the NFL slates, and I did NFL. And what I did myself for the first year or first 2 years even was I created my own spreadsheet where I literally manually inputted the salaries from FanDuel, Yahoo, DraftKings, and Fantasy Draft for all of the relevant players, I thought. And what I was able to do is literally compare one versus the other. You know what I mean? Like, and just see the difference. And yeah, you could subscribe to any of the sites and they'll tell you who's cheap or whatever. But I think that something like that you mentioned, I think everybody should at least once or twice just actually go through the trouble of making like a little comparison chart to see like how different they can be sometimes, and it's something that you can do to make your brain work a little harder and to learn how everything works without going too overboard. I still couldn't make a projection if my life depended on it, right? But that type of thing you can do, and I still think that is a very underrated part of analysis, is when you play on multiple sites to really know the difference in who you're supposed to play on one site as opposed to the other. I still think that a lot of people get a little lazy and say, well, you know what, I analyzed for DraftKings, I'll just see if I can jam the same guys into my FanDuel lineup, and if I can, then I'm going to play it.
So I have a very clear way of thinking about this. I actually think that, especially if you're mass like entering, you don't like, you want to embrace the variance, especially in things like golf and baseball. So what I would say is, like, you want to combine. You only want the guys who are better priced on one site and in cash. I don't really think it matters as much in these other sports, to be honest with you.
Interesting.
So that's why, like, this is, back to another week where, even though I want to pay up and pay down, I do think I can, find ways in some lineups to leave money on the table. There's just so much variance in these extreme games. And in baseball, it's often a good strategy to use too, even though we often end up using our salary. But yeah, I just think that I like to often, and I've actually won tournaments doing that without checking them, because I'll do it for like small buy-ins on FanDuel. I'll just copy my script from my DraftKings and switch it over to FanDuel.
Really?
Without changing a thing. And usually what I'll do is I'll make like a couple of changes, but not many, because I want to embrace the guys who are going to be low owned. And the changes I usually make is, like, Jose Ramirez, when they were playing baseball a couple years ago, we went on that crazy streak. He was like something ridiculous, like 5,500 on FanDuel, and nobody else is 4,800. On DraftKings, he was expensive, but he was really popular on DraftKings, like 30% owned, and he was like 2% owned on FanDuel. And I was just going, okay, well, if he has a big game, he has a big game. Of course, that he happened to hit 2 home runs and had a double for another 2 RBIs. So he had a monster game. But look, the main thing is, like, I think you just need to bet. You need to play the ownership game a little bit. So if you're going to be doing it that way, I wouldn't be looking at it in terms of pricing. I'd be looking at it in terms of ownership for the most part.
That makes a lot of sense.
Maybe in basketball, well, I would say this actually. In basketball, it does make a big difference, though, because you need to use your salary in basketball for the most part,
Yeah.
Anyway, I think that's pretty good. I think we got through a lot of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's do, again, I want to do a kind of a content summary for this coming week, because again, this is like my goal, right? So there is, not to say that I don't miss baseball and basketball, but there's a lot of DFS stuff coming this week. There are, you ready for this? 1, 2, 3, 4 distinct NASCAR races this week. There's a Sunday, I think 2 Saturdays, and a Friday, okay? There's an MMA slate on Saturday. PGA and MMA both have Millie makers, okay? So there is going to be a video out on everything. So Bobby and I are going to do the kind of a final, PGA look tomorrow at some point. I am totally going to do a NASCAR for every one of these slates. Now, again, it's harder for NASCAR because they don't give you the salaries and because they don't have the starting position until sometimes the day before or 2 days before. But as soon as I have it, I'm going to throw it up there because I'm ready. And if Bobby wants to look at MMA, cool. If not, I've already done like several hours of research on MMA for this weekend. So you guys will, again, it's my quest that between Bobby and I, you will have slate reviews for MMA, all 4 NASCAR events, PGA, and hey, and if we're really, really juiced up, maybe we'll throw in some showdown golf also as we as the days go on. But there's a lot going on. There's a lot of money to be made, and yeah, I can't wait for basketball. I can't wait for baseball. But I'm kind of psyched that I've embraced ththese other sports a little bit, without having to go sweat, the shy at 6 a.m. on LOL. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's and I don't not on thank God in a way that that New York band Korean doesn't have Korean baseball. I don't know how you're not doing it. I would totally be up like just trying to grind the Korean baseball slates, but I guess you never really got into doing the research, huh?
No, I mean I started to, and it's just the not knowing what the starting lineups and then recreating. Like I couldn't find I'm not a person who can sleep in until any time. So that I couldn't. I mean, if I really committed to it, I could figure out a way. But I just never. It felt like a whole life change that I wasn't really. And I was sort of back between LA and Santa Barbara, but I'm still like, you know what I mean, man. If I knew the other stuff wasn't coming back for sure, I probably would have given it a shot at some point.
Hey, but I'm telling you, this is taking up enough of my time. I've been telling you, this is between the NASCAR and the PGA, and I'm now I'm in kind of a groove. The Monday the pre-look, the Tuesday the look, Wednesday the final. Then we'll go over. Maybe we'll have a cut sweat Friday. I mean, this is what I've asked for, right? I wanted a schedule. I wanted to know what's going on. So maybe I'm fully intending, by the way, that when basketball and baseball come back, continuing to do NASCAR and PGA, like 100%.
Dude, I'm ready to do multiple things. I'm happy to do those with you. I just don't have anything to offer on those other sports quite like I do with these other ones.
Well, neither do I. I mean, I shouldn't say it that way. But I mean, I'm collecting data. I'm collecting my stuff, looking at ownership and making lineups like it's any other goddamn thing. But all right, sounds good. We will we'll see you tomorrow for sure. And I guess that's it, huh?
Yeah, good luck, guys. For Sheets, I'm Bobby, and we'll see you at the top of the leaderboards.
I'll catch you later, Bobby.